Friday. Oh, thank God it's Friday. TGIF. Have you ever had a morning where there were too many things that absolutely had to be done before you did a radio show, and there just simply were not enough minutes in the hours for everything to be completed? Well, I am still in the process of completing this, and you're going to have to go over to my webpage and to rumormillnews.com and go into the reading room. You'll see a link. If you haven't already got the reading room bookmarked, you'll see a link. And what I have actually done is posted 3 old pictures of me, plus a picture after I had been using the Urac products for about 4 years. And you can see that the Urac really did a lot for me. But I am just about to post one more photograph that was taken a week ago of me. And when I get this finished, and when my guests, Kevin and Plato, tell you about the life extension properties of this machine they're going to be talking about, I got on this machine last August, and you will see physical proof that this machine works, and you'll see it in just a minute or so. So, Kevin, are you and Plato there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Kevin, why don't you start telling us about this machine while I get ready to post the photos of me?
Okay. Well, we have the Ascension Energy Program. I started with Bill Kirkland about in January 1st, and I met him actually through Plato, who's on the line with us today. And that was I went on the machine about July of last year, and so I was standing outside of Starbucks, and I was talking to Bill, and then he's like, just wait a minute while I put you on the machine. And then I went on the machine, and it was like a shift in reality. It was like something changed. I was like, this is really weird. I just felt like there was a buffering of all this negativity. And, and I said, well, that's cool. And then I kind of, had a 5-minute conversation with him, hung up the phone, and I didn't talk to him for a couple of months because one of the things I wanted to see was I wanted to see if there was a real effect in my life. It's nice having a bump, having a little energetic experience, but I found in the past with other things you have this experience and then that was it. Everything go flat and nothing would change in my life. So I was looking for external changes in my life over a period of months, and I eventually, put a bunch of my friends on the program to see if they were changing as well. And so over, 3 or 4 months, I started seeing all these kind of incremental changes in people. And one of the things is, I would see people, they would have sort of a glow. Their eyes were kind of bright. They were awake. They weren't walking around depressed, their shoulders, head down, staring at the sidewalk. There's a liveliness to them that would start percolating. And I also noticed that their lives would start taking on a much more dynamic character. Opportunities would come into their life. They had a new level of enthusiasm. Things before that used to get them down, they wouldn't even notice bothered them anymore. It just seemed like they just would glide right through the process. The machines are called bioresonance machines, is the loose terminology for it. They're not actually technically just bioresonance machines. They're a little bit custom made, but they're based on the physics of an obscure German scientist named Burkhard Heim, who was around during the 80s. And he came up with a unified...
When was he around, the 1980s or 1880s?
1980s.
1980s, okay.
Yeah, he was one of the German scientists after World War II, I believe.
He came over here, huh?
Yeah, I think he was a part of that crew. I don't know the exact backstory. He got hurt in an accident, so he kind of lost the use of one of his arms. I think it was a laboratory accident. So he created something called Metron calculus. Now, Metron calculus is extrapolates the fifth and sixth dimension, so it basically explains what gravity is. Now, no one before Heim, or maybe there are other unified field theories out there, so I'm not really going to discuss them. Even Einstein allegedly has a unified field theory that he produced in 1928 that went into the Black projects, which they use as a basis maybe of the Philadelphia experiment or whatever. But anyway, so we're going to skip Einstein, but we go to Heim. And so Metron calculus explains the fifth and sixth dimension. It essentially explains gravity and explains all the proper resonances of everything in the physical universe. So all the chemical properties and all these things are now explained with Metron calculus. So basically it opens up portals to the fifth and sixth dimension and draws down the unified field. Now traditionally, if we would tap into the unified field, it would be through peak experiences. So you get in a state of love. You have these moments in your life where everything stands still, and then it's sort of like the field of dreams effect, and then you have all this beautiful synchronicity come into your life, and, you know, everything's wonderful. Time suspends for a period of time, but then, of course, we drop out of that state because we can't sustain it. So what the use of the machines do is basically remove the negativity and open up the state of bliss. So basically you're immersed in a unified field. Now the unified field is delivering missing information to your genetics. In other words, the linear plane or the third dimension limits the amount of information that the DNA can encode. And so essentially it's missing information, which is causing basically the death process. Aging is a function of caught in time. And so if you can move beyond time, the other parts of the latent DNA start to activate and open up. And that's just basically an energy principle. So if enough energy accumulates within your system, enough unified field energy, basically the system turns itself on. It's much like a computer system. You cannot run Photoshop unless you have enough processing power. The human body operates the same way. So in the lower levels, it will fight itself and self-destruct. But as the energy levels increase in the subatomic range of the DNA is not just physical, as non-physical aspects that extend beyond the third dimension. So there's an interrelationship or interpenetration between 3, 4, 5, 6, and probably 7 and 8. So your higher self, or whatever that is. So it much functions like string theory, where there's a relationship between your higher self and your physical body and your lower mental and emotional bodies, that there's a communication system that takes place. Now, the time and the linear plane creates an interference pattern. That interference pattern interferes with the communication between your higher self and your lower self. So the string theory is basically the controllers or the fourth dimensional entities have created this grid or this interference pattern that's limited the functioning of the third dimensional body or the physical body, which is basically a code reader for energy. It's a biochemical electromagnetic housing unit for your consciousness. And so as you kind of draw down the unified field theory, the physical body begins to reboot and merge up with your consciousness, so it becomes more dynamic, and ultimately it can become ageless. Now, the latest theories are, and I don't know directly where this comes from, but basically the body is, default mechanism is the state of youth. In other words, the body is meant to live a very long time. We die because all these interference viruses embedded within the matrix of the system. You could even go back to the Bible. They talk about original sin. Well, if you break original sin down in computer terms, it's a virus or a Trojan horse that's infected the genetics or the DNA of man. So David Wilcox talks about them bringing in cryptologists and computer programmers to break the junk part of the DNA. In other words, they're understanding that the junk part of the DNA operates on very similar principles to codes, and also to how computer systems operate. And so now they're beginning to understand more of what the junk DNA does. But it's a different language structure. And they're also understanding that most of it is alien in nature. So most of what we define